Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I move the motion relating to childcare in the terms of which it appears on the notice of paper. Well, over 3 years ago, those opposite promised Australians that life would be cheaper.
They did.
Under Labor. And in those 3 years, interest rates have increased a massive 12 times. Energy bills, not down by $275, but up by $1,000. Living standards for Australians have collapsed by almost 9%. 27,000 businesses have gone insolvent.
That's right.
The most ever. And a family with a typical mortgage has spent an additional $50,000 on their interest payments. Under Labor's economic mismanagement, Australians are experiencing the longest sustained period of inflation since the 1980s. The government has left a litany of broken promises and policy failures in their wake, and Australians are the ones paying for it. Let's take cheaper childcare, for example. If I had $1 for every time the Prime Minister said that Labor would deliver cheaper childcare for Australians, I could retire today, Deputy Speaker, but sadly, for those Australian families, cheaper childcare has become another one of Labor's broken promises. And don't just take my word for it. Let's have a look at the data. According to the Department of Education's own data, childcare costs have increased by 22.3% since June 2022. And according to the ABS data, out-of-pocket costs for families have increased by 12.7% since Labor's cheaper childcare policy came into effect in 2023. But Australian families already know their childcare costs are increasing, and they're not fooled. They are not fooled when the Prime Minister holds a press conference, usually using a childcare centre as a political backdrop, telling them that they're saving money. He keeps telling Australians they're saving money and they're better off under Albanese. But the reality is they're not, and they know it. They're not mugs. The Prime Minister and his government continue to treat Australians like mugs. But they know better. Now, last week I received an email from Naomi, who's currently paying $16,000 a year for childcare after the childcare subsidy for one child, and that's set to increase by another $10,000 when her youngest child attends care from October. That is a lot of money, $36,000 a year for 2 children to attend childcare. What does the Prime Minister have to say to that? Because there's nothing cheap about that childcare. Where is the cost of living relief for Naomi's families and families like hers? Families who are paying more at the supermarket, more at the Bowser, more for their utility bills, their rents, their mortgages and their educational costs. Families who are working multiple jobs just to keep the lights on and food on their table. When will this Prime Minister finally admit to those families that he has failed them? He has failed you.
He has.
And while we're talking about people the Prime Minister has failed, it's a long list. I want to talk about regional Australia, the regions. I don't think the Prime Minister knows where the regions are, unless, of course, there's a photo opportunity. Late last year, Labor announced plans to build 160 new services in regional and outer suburban areas if they win government. Another promise. Now, to regional Australians and to those groups who think that this is a fabulous idea, understandably, I get that, I want to ask you just one thing. If Labor cared so much about you, like they pretend they do right now, in the lead up to election, why didn't they do anything during the last 3 years? Don't be fooled by this shiny announcement, and don't be fooled by the promise of funding for services in the regions. They've already been caught out taking money from the regions through the Community Childcare Fund, which was designed for the regions, and giving it to inner metro seats. They cannot be trusted. Services in regional areas have been forced to close their doors because they missed out on much-needed funding. Now, funding that was redistributed to metro areas, including services in the Prime Minister's own electorate of Grayndler. It was funding that was designed for regional and rural and remote communities, and they're already robbing those Australians to give them more inner-city votes. If you think this Building Early Education Fund will be any different, I think you'll be sorely disappointed. The only thing you're getting from the beef is a bad taste in your mouth when you realise that Labor only cares about, well, Labor. This train wreck of a government doesn't deserve 3 more years of your trust. You cannot trust them, because all that 3 more years will bring is more years of pain for Australian families.
I thank the member for Moncrieff. Is the motion seconded?
It is, Deputy Speaker, and I reserve my right to speak.